So the last time I spoke on emotions and Bhakti Yoga. The message was that in the first stage of spiritual life, your emotions are unruly, uncontrollable, unmanageable, reactive, spontaneous, impossible to control. So how do you deal with those emotions? And the answer is that at that first stage of spiritual life, which we call as Bhakti Yoga, which is to be differentiated from Para Bhakti, when you begin the process of Bhakti Yoga, which is an imitative form of Para Bhakti, under the guidance of a discipline administered and monitored by a teacher, you don't suppress the emotion, you don't deny the emotion, you don't extinguish the emotion, all of which could lead to serious consequences, both psychological and spiritual. I explained last time that if you bottle up your anger and suppress it, then this bottled up anger, which is suppressed, short circuits in the brain and often could cause panic disorder because the center for fear and anger are so close by the brain. But at the same time, the answer is not to vent your emotions on the unfortunate people around you. On the path of Bhakti Yoga, what we do is we direct those emotions towards God. We train ourselves through sadhana, through an overarching philosophy of life, and through a certain discipline of our personal habit and conduct, so that we may share our emotions with Bhagavan, Shri Krishna. So are you depressed? Share your sorrow with Krishna. Are you filled with fear? Share your fears with Krishna. Are you filled with joy? Experience that joy with Krishna. So you feel like weeping, then weep at the feet of Krishna. So instead of inflicting your emotions on other people, and instead of bottling up these emotions and suppressing them, these emotions are now directed towards Bhagavan Shri Krishna. And when you share your emotions with him, and you share your thoughts and feelings with him, this Lord who is seated in your heart will speak to you just as you are speaking to him. Intuitively, this Lord will direct you, will calm you, and will help you to transcend emotion. So from Bhakti Yoga today, I want to take you to the next stage. And what is the next stage? The next stage is when you successfully transcend your emotion, when you are situated on the platform of pure consciousness, when you are, shall we say, above reactive emotion, that stage is called many things in the Bhagavad-Geeta because that is a syncretic fusion of multiple philosophies. So you have the Sthita Prajna, you have the Bhakta, you have the Karma Yogi, you have the Dhyana Yogi, you have the Gunatita, and so on. That is the nature of one who has transcended emotion and who is situated on the platform of pure consciousness. So how does one rise to that level? How does one come to that platform which we call as Brahma Bhuta? Brahma Bhuta Prasannatmana Sochati Na Kankshati Sama Sarveshu Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktan Labhate Para. When you are situated on the spiritual platform, we call as Brahma Bhuta, at that on that platform there is no more hankering and there is no more lamentation. No more are you sorrowing and no more are you excited and jumping with joy. Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na sochati na kankshati. Neither lament nor aspire or want anything or desire anything, nor do you exult, nor do you jump with excitement. Samah sarveshu bhuteshu. You look upon all living entities with equal vision. On that platform, when you arrive, Krishna says, I grant you Para Bhakti, which is the third phase of spiritual life. The first phase of spiritual life is Bhakti Yoga. The second phase, which we are going to discuss today, are the characteristics of the person on Brahma Bhuta, which goes from Sthita Prajna to the Bhakta to the Dhyan Yogi to the Gunatita, etc. But it might be useful for us to try to go into the origins of emotion to understand how we transcend emotion. And how do we go to the root of emotion? You must understand that evolutionarily, every child is born into the world entirely at the mercy of those around him. He has no teeth, he has no claws, he's unable to stand or walk, he's unable to run. Unlike many other animals, even mammals, you will find that the giraffe, when it is born, it immediately runs behind the mother. That's not so for the child. The human child takes sometimes 5 years before it is able to survive on its own. So in these 5 years of life, so that it may survive and it may have some foundation with which to protect itself in the lifetime ahead of it, God grants that infant what we call as the sense of self or ahankar. This sense of self or ahankara starts from the brain of that infant. The brain functions in not as individual nuclei that are firing, but the brain functions in neural circuits. And for all children who are born after the appropriate period, not for premature infants, but for mature infants who are born, they have in their brain a circuit which spontaneously, naturally, effortlessly comes into being. And that sense of that neural circuit is called the social cognition mode, or it's called the default mode. Because of that neural circuit, the baby starts thinking right from birth of the self, the idea of who the baby thinks it is. And therefore it smiles at the mother when it comes into, meets as eye contact with the mother, it may smile. It is comforted by the skin of the mother. And gradually, the child learns to interact with the other people around it. So the mother, the father, the grandfather, the grandmother, the siblings, the brothers, the sisters, the child constantly keeps developing a sense of self. This ahankar is there to help it form emotional relationships with those around it for its own protection. And what do we mean by protect itself? It learns to smile, it learns to wave, it learns to imitate. And as we grow up, this sense of self helps us to protect ourselves from the environment that we go into within the world. We call it the social cognition mode because this sense of self is constantly thinking. This is the source of the monkey mind. This is the source of the mind that does not stop. This is the source of the chatter of the mind, which you find impossible to suppress or deny. And because of this sense of chatter that develops through this neural circuit called the default mode or the social cognition mode, we become concerned with I, me, myself, mine, etc. Which is fine because God has given it to you for your protection. But it is not given to you to be overused or unnecessarily used. You see, in Switzerland, everyone does military service, and every man has in his home a rifle. But you never hear of people taking a rifle in Switzerland and going and committing a sandy hook where they enter into a school or into public place and start shooting and killing people. Although everyone has a rifle, that rifle is stored, that rifle is oiled and clean, that rifle may be used for continuing training, but it is not used randomly. It is not used on people around themselves, and it is not used to threaten other people. But in the United States, where there is a huge outcry against gun violence, so many people have guns. They say even every individual, if you see, could be having 4 guns or more. But those guns are there. While they are there for your protection, you find people using them in drive-by shootings. You find them taking it into cinema theaters or movie theaters and killing people randomly. You find people attacking political figures. So they enter into schools and shoot, which means they are misusing that weapon which has been given to them. So also this sense of self or this sense of ahankara, this I, me, myself, mine, this sense of self is given to you for your protection. When you are threatened, when you are pushed around, when you require to use it, it is to be used. When you're signing a legal contract, if you don't have a sense of self, you're finished. But if you start using this sense of self on people around you, on your husband or your wife or your children, we start using this sense of self to invade upon people around you, including your siblings or people at work. This is misuse of this sense of self, or what we call as ahankar or false ego. Now, what really happens is, on the process of Bhakti Yoga, as you proceed, remembering God and forgetting self, the sense of self or the ego becomes attenuated or weakened. You learn how to transcend it. You learn how to get beyond it. You learn how to regulate its use. You learn how to keep it for emergency use. And as you remember God and forget self, one miraculous thing happens. And that miraculous thing is you transcend emotion. So transcending self, transcending false ego, transcending ahankar is the way you transcend emotion. So in the second chapter of the Bhagawad-Geeta, Arjuna asks Lord Krishna in text 54, Sthita pragnasya ka bhasha samadhi stasya keshava Sthitadi kim prabhasheta kim asita vrajeta kim. What are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is merged in spirit? How does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit? How does he walk? This is a question which you also have to answer. What will happen to you? What will happen to you as you transcend your sense of self? Not only will you transcend sense of self, Krishna explains, but you will transcend reactive emotion. Dukheshu anudvignamana, sukheshu vigata spriha, vita raga bhaya krodha stitadir munir uchyate. So there are three types of miseries that one experiences. One of them is misery caused by divine forces called Adi Daivik. This is the monsoon, and when you go out into the rain, or rather you go out into the sunshine, and you are caught unawares by a cloud burst. When you are trapped and when you are caught in flooded streets, this is called Adi Daivik suffering. When you suffer under the sunshine on a hot summer's day, that experience is also called Adi Daivik suffering. Then you have the type of suffering which is caused by other living entities. For example, if a mosquito bites you, if a dog bites you, indeed, even if a dog barks at you, this is caused by This suffering is caused by other living beings. It's called Adhi Bhautik suffering. And when you suffer due to the afflictions of your own body and mind, when you undergo depression, when you undergo anxiety, when you have panic disorder, when you are suffering due to various ailments of the body, this is called Adhyatmic suffering. Now, Krishna says that one who transcends his emotions, one who is able to move beyond his sense of self or ego or ahankar, one who is a sage, who is absorbed in steady wisdom of pure consciousness, who is able to transcend this ahankar or sense of self or false ego, he is free from all these three miseries. He is free also from elation, excitement, euphoria that comes with happiness. He is also free from attachment, fear, and anger. Such an individual is called a Sthita Prajna, or he is a sage of steady wisdom, a sage whose mind, who's transcended the mind and ego and is situated in transcendence, in spirit. We have emotions that are reactive in the early phase of our spiritual journey. And these reactive emotions that we experience are self-generated emotions which are caused by unconscious forces that lie within us. And what do we mean by the unconscious forces that lie within us? Please try to understand that we are fully in control of our emotions if we choose to. Last time I spoke of Lisa Feldman Barrett and her book, How We Create Our Own Emotions. So what happens is that we have a cognitive process. We start thinking about the person or about the situation that lies in front of us. And we tell ourselves a story about that individual, or we tell ourselves a story about that event or those circumstances. And often we tell ourselves this story, most of the time we tell ourselves the story so fast that we don't even realize we've told ourselves the story. And because we tell ourselves the story, we take a decision. And reflexly, it appears reflexly, automatively, we then burst into anger, fear, depression, etc., etc. So Krishna explains in the Bhagawad-Geeta chapter 2, Yah sarvatra anabhishnehas tat tat prapya shubha ashubham na nandati na dveshati tasya prajna pratishtita. When you are without attachment, this individual who is without attachment does not rejoice when he obtains good, nor does he lament when he obtains evil. He is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge of the Spirit. Yada samahrate chayam kurmangniva sarvashah indriyani indriyartevyas tasya prajna pratishtha. Just like a tortoise withdraws its limbs and head into its shell, so also the person who is fixed in divine consciousness is able to withdraw his senses from the world within himself. and remain in perfect spiritual consciousness. So the secret is, when we are able to transcend self, when we are without ahankar, whether we have extinguished ahankar, whether we have transcended ahankar, whether we have attenuated ahankar. But remember, we need that ahankar to protect ourselves in this world when occasion demands. So, in the Karma Yogi, Krishna declares that such a person, when he is walking, talking, working, eating, sleeping, smelling, tasting, he knows he does nothing. And he knows that it's his body, his prakriti. He knows it's the mind which is performing all these actions. In chapter 5, texts 8 and 9, he says, Naiva kinchit karomiti yukta manyeta tattvavit pashyan shrinvan sprishan jigaran ashnan gachan shwapan shwasan pralapam visrijam grinan unmisam nimishan api indriyani indriyartheshu vartantya itya dharaya. He knows that he is not the body. He knows he is not the mind. Indeed, he knows that it's the body and mind which is interacting with the world. This is the sage who has transcended his ahankar. Similarly, in the 6th chapter, which is on Dhyana Yoga, Krishna explains that for one who has conquered his mind is the best of friends. But one who has not conquered his mind, the same mind is his greatest enemy. So for one who has transcended his ahankar, for him the mind is the greatest friend. For one who has not transcended his ahankar, for him that mind is his worst enemy. We remember God and forget self when we stop using the default circuit of the brain, when we rise beyond what we call as the social cognition mode. This is also known as the task negative mode. When your brain is not doing anything, it starts chattering. When the brain starts doing something, it goes from default mode, from social cognition mode, it transitions into what is called the task positive mode. And in this task positive mode, you may be working in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion to God. In this task positive mode, you may be chanting the names of God in remembering God and forgetting self. At such times, you are in task positive mode, and thus your brain then stops the chatter. Very often we find when people are hurt, unhappy, when they lose a loved one, often at work they say, no, you take some days off. I say, no, never take a day off. Absorb yourself in your work. Absorb yourself in your work in a spirit of renunciation. And that will give you relief. In the Bhagawad-Geeta in 12.12, Krishna explains. What does Krishna explain in 12.12? Krishna explains in 12.12 that there are different stages of spiritual progress. He says, Shreyo hi jnanam abhyasaj. Abhyas yoga means making it a habit to remember God, to perform ritual, to perform worship in a ritual manner. So he says to have spiritual knowledge is superior to that. But superior to spiritual knowledge, he says, is meditation. So meditation is superior to spiritual knowledge. And he says even superior to meditation, dhyanat sarva karma phala tyagas. When you can work in a spirit of renunciation, then that, Krishna says, is the highest of all. Because tyagat shanti ranantaram. It is the means by which you attain supreme peace of mind. So also Krishna explains that one who has thus attained pure consciousness is his pure devotee. Adveshta sarva bhutanam maitrakarnya evacha nirmamo ahankara samadukha sukha shami santushta satatam yogi yatatma dhrida nishchaya Mai arpita mano buddhir yomad bhaktah same priya. He has no enemies. He doesn't hate anybody. Doesn't dislike anybody. He is a kind friend to all living entities. He does not think that he is the owner or proprietor or controller. He is free from his ahankar or ego, false ego. And he is even-minded in both happiness and distress. He, the yogi, is always satisfied and is engaged in acting in a spirit of devotion and renunciation. His mind and intelligence are absorbed in me, and he is totally very dear to me. Again, in chapter 14, Krishna explains what happens to that individual who has transcended Bhakti Yoga and has now reached that state where he is beyond emotion. He has transcended his ahankar or his ego. And again there Krishna is asked by Arjuna. Arjuna vacha kairlingai strin gunanetan atito bhavati prabho kimachara katham chaitans trina gunanati vartate. By what symptoms is he known who is transcendent to these three gunas? What is his behavior and how does he transcend the modes of nature of sattva, raja and tamoguna? And this is a very beautiful section of the Bhagavad-Geeta. In chapter 14, text 22 to 25, Krishna explains what happens to one who has transcended his ego. He has risen beyond ahankar. He has been absorbed in God and he has forgotten his sense of self. So he may be in sattva gun, he may be in rajagun, he may be in tamagun. But he understands that it's his mind which is in harmony. It's his mind which is in activity. It is his mind which is in laziness and sloth. He doesn't hate any guna. He does not hate harmony or he does not hate acquisitiveness or desire. He does not hate being in ignorance. He sees them as the passing seasons of the body and mind. So such a person is, Krishna explains, Tulyo mitrari pakshayo, he is beyond friend and enemy. He is in fact a person who has abandoned all activities which are for the ego. And such a person is absorbed in pure consciousness. So, the first stage, we are unable to control our emotions. And because we are unable to control our emotions, what we do is we take to the path of Bhakti Yoga. And the path of Bhakti Yoga then helps you to direct these emotions towards God. It enables you to share your emotions with God. And when you speak to God, God speaks to you. Even if you don't have faith, if you talk to God incessantly, God will speak to you. The second stage which we discussed today is when you become free of ego, when you are able to transcend ahankar, when you are able to move beyond I, me and myself, when you are able to move into what we call as task positive mode, when we act in the world in a spirit of devotion and renunciation, without desiring anything in this world, we continue to do our duties and fulfill our responsibilities. And when we do that, we reach that platform of Sthita Prajna. We reach that platform of Brahma Bhut. We reach that platform of the Bhakta, of the Dhyan Yogi, of the Gunatit. And we are free of emotions. At least we are free of reactive emotions. And because we are free of reactive emotions, this state is called the state of spiritual wisdom of consciousness. In all religions in the world, in all places in the world, a sure sign of wisdom is emotional regulation. And a sure sign of madness is loss of emotional control. So follow the path of the Bhagavad-Geeta and learn to transcend emotion so that you can see the world clearly as it is. And next time we will discuss what is the third stage. What are the emotions of one who has transcended the ego? How does he use these emotions? So that we will understand the next time. So if anyone has any questions, queries, please speak up now. Does anyone have any questions? No questions so far? All right. Jai Shri Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hari Om.